woke up because something was taking hold of my wrist, not checking my pulse, not adjusting a line. Taking hold, firm, deliberate, like you grip something you intend to draw from. The sensation was cold and deep, pressed tight against the bone. My breath stalled halfway in, refusing to go any farther, and panic flared before my body could catch up to it. I forced my eyes open. White ceiling, fluorescent panels buzzing faintly, the smell of disinfectant thick enough to taste. Hospital. The word arrived fully formed, but nothing came with it. No memory of arrival, no memory of pain, no crash, no before, just the room and the grip on my wrist. I turned my head. A nurse stood beside the bed. She was close enough that the edge of her shadow crossed the sheet. Pale blue scrubs, too neat, too still. Her hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She wasn't leaning in or working on anything. She was simply standing there, holding my wrist and watching my face. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was calm, soft, and completely empty of warmth. I tried to pull my hand back. My arm moved an inch and stopped. Her fingers tightened. The cold deepened, and then I felt it properly. The slow, steady pull inside my arm. Something vital being drawn out in a controlled way. My chest tightened as if the space inside it was shrinking. My heartbeat faltered, missed, then recovered unevenly. The monitor beside the bed chirped once and adjusted. She watched me while it happened. My mouth opened. No sound came out. She released my wrist. The pulling stopped instantly. I dragged in air, sharp and burning, my throat aching as if I'd been held underwater too long. She stepped back half a pace and glanced at the monitor, composed. "You were in a car accident," she said. "You were admitted with mild injuries." The words didn't match the way my body felt. My wrist throbbed with a cold ache that hadn't been there before. My breathing stayed shallow. "What happened?" I asked. She didn't answer that. Above the door, a red digital clock glowed. 1:04. "You should be resting," she said. I tried to sit up. My arms responded, heavy and slow. My legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Dizziness rolled through me when I shifted. "Where's the doctor?" I asked. "In the morning," she said. "What's your name?" The question came out too fast, too desperate. She looked at me again, really looked this time, and something about the way she did it made my stomach turn. "You don't need it," she said. She turned toward the door. It opened without a sound. She stepped through. It closed again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart still racing, my wrist tingling where she'd held it. I pressed the call button taped to the rail. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. That was when the quiet of the room began to feel wrong. Hospitals are never this still. There's always something. Carts, voices, distant alarms. Here there was only the steady beep of my monitor and the hum of the lights. I watched the clock. 1:17, 1:29, 1:46. Time dragged in uneven stretches. My breathing never settled. Each inhale stopped short, like my lungs had forgotten the last part of the motion. My wrist ached in a way that felt deeper than muscle or joint, a cold soreness that spread slowly into my forearm. I tried to tell myself I was confused, sedated, that my body was reacting badly to medication. I tried to replay what she'd said, car accident, mild injuries, over and over, as if repetition would make it real. At 1:58, the air in the room felt thinner, not colder, thinner. I turned my head. She was standing beside the bed again. I hadn't heard the door. "You're still awake," she said. "I can't breathe properly," I told her. "Something's wrong." "That is expected," she replied. Her hand reached for my wrist. "Please," I said, and the word came out weak. "Don't." She didn't pause. Her fingers closed around my wrist with the same precise grip as before. The pull returned immediately, stronger now. It felt like my chest was being emptied from the inside, like something behind my ribs was being carefully drawn away. My vision dimmed at the edges. My arms grew heavier, useless. The monitor responded again, uncertain, adjusting to something it didn't understand. I tried to shout. Nothing came. She watched my face, intent, unblinking. Then she released me. I gasped, coughing, my throat raw. Tears slid into my ears, hot and useless. "You're responding," she said. "To what?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She turned and walked to the door. It opened silently. She stepped out. The hour that followed was unbearable. My body didn't recover when she left. The weakness stayed. My hands trembled. My legs felt numb from the knees down. When I tried to lift my arm, it shook and dropped back onto the sheet. I reached for the water cup on the tray table. Half of it spilled onto the bed because my hand wouldn't steady. The cold water felt wrong against my skin, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I pressed the call button again. Nothing. I grabbed my phone from the table. The screen stayed black no matter how many times I pressed the power button. The clock glowed red and indifferent. 2:21. My thoughts began to slow. Words felt thick in my head, like they were sinking before I could use them. I tried to picture the accident, road, headlights, impact, but my mind gave me nothing. The emptiness behind that attempt scared me almost as much as the nurse. At 2:59, my breathing became even shallower, each breath more work than the last. At 3:01, the air thinned again. She was there, standing beside the bed, exactly where she'd been before, close enough that her shadow touched my chest. This time, I watched her carefully. Her chest wasn't moving. No rise, no fall. I waited for the small signs people can't help. The shift of weight, the swallow, the breath through the nose. Nothing. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked. "Every hour," she said. My heart rate jumped, and the monitor picked it up instantly. Her eyes flicked toward my chest. "You didn't come through the door," I said. She didn't react. Her hand reached for my wrist again. I tried to pull away. My elbow scraped the bed rail, pain flaring sharp and normal for half a second before the cold swallowed it. Her fingers closed around my wrist. The pull hit harder than before. My vision narrowed. My chest tightened until breathing felt pointless. My legs went completely numb, as if the signal to them had been cut. Tears slid into my ears. "You're not human," I whispered. For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not emotion, not surprise, just a slight tightening, like a mask settling more firmly into place. Her mouth moved without sound, shaping something I couldn't hear. Then she released me abruptly. I jolted, sucking in air, my body shaking. "You're observing," she said quietly. "That makes it slower." She turned toward the door. She didn't open it. She walked forward and passed through it, as if the door wasn't there at all. I lay there staring at the closed door, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes had just seen, my wrist burning with cold and ache. The clock read 3:07, and I knew, with a certainty that settled heavy in my chest, that the night was nowhere near finished. I woke up screaming. The sound tore out of me before I understood why, ripping my throat raw as my body convulsed against the bed. My wrist burned with cold pain, sharp enough to feel fresh, like her fingers were still wrapped around it. The scream collapsed into a hoarse gasp when my lungs refused to take in enough air. I lay there choking, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling lights until they steadied into shape again. The monitor beside me was frantic now, its rhythm uneven, reacting to the chaos inside my chest. I hadn't fallen asleep. I was certain of that. There had been no drifting, no blur, no sense of time passing. One moment I'd been staring at the door she walked through. The next, my body had seized and the scream had come out of me like it had been waiting. I forced myself to breathe slowly, shallow breaths stacking on top of each other because deeper ones still wouldn't come. The clock glowed red. 3:14. Only minutes had passed. The room felt wrong in a new way now. Not just quiet, but hollow, like the space had been scooped out and left thinner than it should be. The air pressed strangely against my skin, making every exposed part of me feel colder. I pressed the call button again. Nothing. I pressed it until my thumb hurt. Nothing. The certainty settled in my chest, heavy and immovable. No one was coming unless she decided to come. I lay there listening to my own breathing, counting it, afraid to stop. Each breath felt like work. Each exhale felt longer than it should, like my lungs were reluctant to empty because they weren't sure they'd refill properly. My wrist throbbed with a deep, aching cold that radiated up my arm and into my shoulder. It wasn't pain in the normal sense. It felt like something inside the joint had been scraped hollow. I tried to curl my fingers. They moved, but slowly, clumsily, like they were underwater. I shifted my legs and felt a dull numbness from the knees down. I could move them, but the feedback was wrong, delayed, as if my body was reporting to me secondhand. I turned my head toward the door. It was closed. I waited for it to open. Minutes passed. The monitor calmed slightly, settling into a rhythm that still felt too fast, but less chaotic. That almost made it worse. It gave the illusion that my body was coping when I could feel unmistakably that it wasn't. My thoughts began to slide, slowing. Words in my head took longer to form. Sentences arrived half-finished and then dissolved before I could hold on to them. I tried to think through simple things, my name, my age, where I lived, and found that each answer came with effort, like lifting something heavy that didn't want to move. I focused on the clock. 3:27. The air thinned. She was there, standing beside the bed, exactly where she always stood. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't heard anything. She was simply present. Her posture was unchanged, straight, balanced, hands relaxed at her sides. Her face was calm in that same empty way, eyes fixed on me like she'd been watching the whole time. "You're awake," she said. "I didn't sleep," I whispered. "I didn't fall asleep." "That is not relevant," she replied. Her voice was the same as before. She stepped closer. I tried to scoot backward, but my body barely responded. The mattress dipped under her weight as she leaned in, and that alone made my heart stumble. "Don't," I said. The word felt small and useless. She reached for my wrist. The moment her fingers closed around it, the drain began again. It was immediate now, no delay, no build-up, as if my body had already been prepared. The cold surged up my arm and into my chest. My breath stuttered. My heartbeat went erratic, fluttering wildly before slowing in a way that made panic explode behind my eyes. The monitor reacted, chirping sharply, adjusting, then chirping again as if it couldn't decide how to compensate. I tried to pull away. My arm moved an inch and stopped. She watched my face closely, eyes tracking every change, every flicker of response. I felt myself slipping. My vision dimmed. The room seemed farther away. My thoughts slowed to a crawl. She didn't hurry. She never hurried. My mouth opened. I tried to beg. What came out was a wet, broken sound that barely resembled a word. She leaned closer. Up close, the wrongness of her was impossible to ignore. Her skin wasn't pale the way living skin gets pale. It looked stretched, almost translucent. The fine cracks around her mouth were clearer now. Her eyes reflected the light strangely, swallowing it instead of returning it. "You are deteriorating," she said calmly. "Why?" I whispered. She didn't answer. The drain continued. My chest felt empty now, like there was nothing solid left inside it to hold my breath properly. My heart stumbled again, slower this time, and I felt a sudden, terrifying sense of distance from my own body, like I was observing it from somewhere just behind my eyes. My hands went completely numb. My legs followed. I couldn't feel the bed beneath me anymore. Then, abruptly, she released my wrist. The cold vanished. I jolted, dragging in air that burned my throat and made my ribs ache. My body shook violently, as if it didn't know how to function without the pressure she'd been applying. She stepped back. "You are observing," she said. "That makes it slower." I stared at her, tears running into my ears. "You're killing me," I said. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering the statement. "No," she replied. "You are still alive." She turned toward the door. I watched her feet, watched them cross the threshold. The door did not open. She passed through it as if it wasn't there. I lay there gasping, my heart racing, my body trembling uncontrollably. The weakness didn't lift this time. It stayed. My breathing remained shallow and uneven. My limbs felt heavy and distant. My thoughts drifted in and out of focus, sliding away before I could anchor them. I watched the clock with a growing sense of dread. 3:41, 3:58. I knew she would come back, not because she'd said so, but because my body felt unfinished, like she hadn't taken everything she intended to yet. At 4:07, my right arm went completely limp. At 4:22, my speech began to slur when I tried to speak out loud, the words blurring together as if my tongue had forgotten their shapes. At 4:36, I tried to lift my head and failed. The room tilted slightly to the left and never corrected itself. The monitor kept beeping, adjusting, compensating for a body that was steadily losing the ability to compensate for itself. At 4:51, the air thinned again. I didn't bother turning my head this time. I already knew she was there. She didn't take my wrist this time. Her hand settled flat against the center of my chest, patient, deliberate, like she was listening for something beneath my ribs. The cold went straight through me, deeper than before, and my heart reacted instantly, fluttering wildly, then slowing in a way that made the monitor hesitate, unsure whether to alarm or adjust. I tried to push her away. My arm lifted a few inches and dropped. "You're nearly finished," she said. Her voice was calm, certain. I forced my eyes toward the clock above the door. 5:03. Every breath was work now. Each inhale stopped short, shallow and unsatisfying, like my lungs no longer understood what they were supposed to do. The edges of my vision darkened, the ceiling lights pulling away from me as if the room were receding. The pulling sensation wasn't sharp anymore. It was diffuse, everywhere, like whatever she was taking had already been loosened, and now it was simply being gathered. My thoughts thinned. I tried to form words. Help, please, stop, but they fell apart before they reached my mouth. Sound left me in small, broken fragments that didn't resemble language. Her hand remained steady. She watched my face the way someone watches a clock when they're waiting for a specific moment. Then she lifted her hand. The cold released. The pressure eased slightly. My heart lurched, stuttered, and then caught again, fragile and uneven. She stepped back. "Morning soon," she said. She turned away. One moment she was there, a shape beside the bed. The next, the space was empty. I lay there waiting for it to end anyway. That was the longest part, the stretch where she was gone, but the damage remained. My body didn't recover when she left. It continued to fail quietly, systems slipping one by one without drama. The monitor beeped unevenly. Sometimes it steadied just long enough to give me hope, then faltered again. My mouth was so dry it hurt to swallow. My hands lay useless at my sides, fingers half-curled, numb and heavy. I couldn't tell where my legs were unless I looked at them. I stared at the clock in brief, unfocused glances. 5:17, 5:42, 5:49. Between those moments, I drifted in and out of a thin awareness, afraid that if I let go completely, I wouldn't come back. Each time my eyes closed, reopening them felt harder, like my body was resisting the effort. Light crept into the room through the narrow gap in the blinds, gray, weak, unconvincing. At 6:14, I heard footsteps. Real ones. The sound cut through the haze immediately, shoes on polished floor, a low murmur of voices, ordinary, human noise. The door opened with a normal sound. 2 nurses entered, one holding a clipboard, the other rubbing at tired eyes. "Good morning," one of them said gently. The warmth in her voice almost hurt. She looked at the monitor and frowned. "That's not right." Her colleague moved closer. "He looks terrible." I tried to speak. "She came," I whispered. Both nurses paused. "The night nurse," I added. "Every hour." They exchanged a look, confusion first, Then something closer to concern. "There wasn't anyone assigned to you overnight," the nurse said carefully. "You were sedated. You should have slept." "I didn't," I said, my voice cracked. She touched me. They didn't argue. They moved quickly instead. More staff arrived. A doctor. Equipment. Someone pressed the wall panel, and it worked instantly, the way it should have all night. They checked my vitals again and again. They couldn't explain the numbers. They couldn't explain how someone admitted with mild injuries was hovering near organ failure by morning. They stabilized me slowly. Fluids, oxygen, medication. Hours passed before my breathing felt less desperate, before my heart settled into something that didn't feel like it might stop without warning. Before I was discharged, I asked one last time, "Who was working last night?" I said. The nurse shook her head. "No one assigned to you." They showed me the hallway footage. Most of the night the corridor was empty. At 3:02, the image warped for a few seconds, bending like heat shimmer before snapping back into place. At 5:03, it happened again. No one entered my room. They sent me home that afternoon. For weeks afterward, I woke at the top of every hour, my wrist aching with that familiar cold pressure. I would lie there listening to my own breathing, waiting for the air to thin. The worst part wasn't the fear that she might come back. It was the certainty that she had been careful all night to leave me alive, which meant she knew exactly how much she could take.